We turn then into our reading for today, which is found in the last chapter of John's Gospel. It's chapter 21. We'll begin with verse 1. They're meeting up by the Sea of Galilee today. Tiberias was its other nickname. That's the one the Romans wanted to give it. So we'll read the Roman name today, because that's what John wrote. After these things, Jesus showed himself again to the disciples by the Sea of Tiberias. And he showed himself in this way. Gathered there together were Simon Peter, Thomas called the twin, Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and 2 others of his disciples. Simon Peter said to them, "I'm going fishing." They said to him, "We will go with you." They went out and got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. Just after daybreak, Jesus stood on the beach, but the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to them, "Children, you have no fish, have you?" They answered him, "No." He said to them, "Cast the net to the right side of the boat, and you will find some." So they cast it, and now they were not able to haul it in, because there were so many fish. That disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, "It is the Lord." When Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on some clothes, for he was naked, and jumped into the sea. But the other disciples came in the boat, dragging the net full of fish, for they were not far from the land, only about 100 yards off. When they had gone ashore, they saw a charcoal fire there with fish on it and bread. Jesus said to them, "Bring some of the fish that you have just caught." So Simon Peter went aboard and hauled the net ashore, full of large fish, 153 of them. And though there were so many, the net was not torn. Jesus said to them, "Come and have breakfast." Now none of the disciples dared to ask him, "Who are you?" because they knew it was the Lord. Jesus came and took the bread and gave it to them, and did the same with the fish. This was now the 3rd time that Jesus appeared to the disciples after he was raised from the dead. When they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my lambs." A second time he said to him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Tend my sheep." He said to him the 3rd time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" And he said to him, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my sheep. Very truly I tell you, when you were younger, you used to fasten your own belt and to go wherever you wished. But when you grow old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will fasten a belt around you and take you where you do not wish to go." He said this to indicate the kind of death by which Peter would glorify God. After this, he said to him, "Follow me." John chapter 21 feels a lot like graduation time. It's the last chapter of the book. There's this sense of farewell throughout the story, because Jesus is only there for a short while. It wasn't that long ago that Jesus was crucified, and then they had Easter. This would be the 3rd appearance of Jesus to these disciples. Also, it's going to be the last appearance. Wait a minute, I know, you're going to say, wait a minute, last appearance? Well, yes, we had a Last Supper a few weeks ago. That's Jesus in the upper room, but keep in mind, that's the Last Supper before Jesus goes to the cross, and then there's Easter. This is the last meal together before Jesus is really going to leave and go back to God. But this is not the second Last Supper. We're saved by technicality. It said they fished all night and caught nothing. So when they see Jesus in the morning on the shore asking them if they have any fish, this means it's the last breakfast. I like to call this story the last breakfast. And so, of course, they get to have fresh fish because they caught some fresh fish. They're not having dried fish That's what a lot of the Sea of Galilee fish were used for, is for resale, and they had no refrigerators. And so what they did was they would dry that fish. So anybody that has Scandinavian heritage would realize that's a lot like lutefisk, because lutefisk is a kind of dried fish that's rehydrated. So in the Holy Land, a lot of the fish from the Sea of Galilee, they were dried. But this morning, it's fresh fish. It's catch of the day. So Jesus has the fire ready. They get to eat while it's hot, and it's just come right out of the water. So with this last breakfast, we also begin to think about who is there. This is why we come up with the lucky 7. And I swear to you graduates, several weeks ago when I was lining up the scriptures for May, I didn't realize that we're going to have 7 from Doniphan-Rosedale that would be recognizing. So I didn't pick lucky 7, although you've had more than good luck. I think by hard work and skill, some of these things that you've done this year and the past 4 years, you've made some of your own luck. But we want to talk about the lucky 7 disciples that happened to be there for the last breakfast. The first one, of course, is Peter. And as Peter answered his question, Jesus said to him, "Do you love me?" And Jesus said, "Feed my sheep, tend my sheep, feed my lambs." This is Jesus passing the baton to Peter and saying, "You're going to be in charge." I'm asking you these care and feeding questions because I want you to be in charge of the care and feeding of my followers. So that's Peter. That's our number 1. Number 2, that is Thomas the twin. That's doubting Thomas. He didn't give up. After Jesus came back and said, "Thomas, I'm here for you." Because he was standing behind the door. He was down at Casey's getting pizza for them that night. I don't know what Thomas was doing, but he wasn't there. And his feelings were hurt that Jesus didn't wait around and appear to him, but thanks, Jesus showed up that second time. So it's that guy. He's the second one there. And then it says there's Nathaniel. And, Nate Jones got a rise out of him over at Rosedale, but that's spelled different. He hasn't lived for 2,000 years. But Nathaniel, he's the one that in the 1st, 2nd chapter of John, I think it is, Jesus is meeting the disciples and he sees Nathaniel under the fig tree reading the scripture. He says out loud, "Aha, an Israelite in whom there is no guile." He recognized Nathaniel was a good-hearted man, a really honest man. But remember, I didn't put any pressure on Nate Jones. I didn't lean on him too hard. Then, of course, that's 3. Disciples number 4 and 5, they're called the sons of Zebedee. They're also nicknamed the sons of thunder. That's James and John. They're going to go on to do great things. James writes the letter of James, and his mission field was Spain. Back then they called it Gaul. But James, the disciple, he went on over to where modern-day Spain is to spread the gospel. And then his brother John, who wrote today's passage, he's the big writer of the group, because he wrote today's gospel. He'll go on to write 3 letters, John 1, 2, and 3, and then the book of Revelation. Bible scholars believe John was given the book of Revelation. 5 books of the New Testament. These are the 5 that are named that we can identify. But then there's 2 others. It just says, and there were 2 others to round out the lucky 7. When I think about the 2 others, I always think about when I read about baseball trades, such as the Cubs traded Anthony Rizzo to the Yankees for so-and-so. I think they got a pitcher, and 2 others to be named later. Do you remember reading that when they trade people? They're always saying there's 2 others, or 1 or 2 others to be named later. So they're always trading their minor leaguers back and forth. They don't even name them. So we got 2 disciples, but I'm not calling them minor leaguers. I'm thinking a different way. Because in a way, those 2 others, they represent us, right? When we signed up for Christianity, didn't we become a disciple too? So those 2 others, we might say symbolically, that includes us. We're among the others that follow. So that's kind of a neat thing. And then Something that I want to pick up on is also then, in addition to these 7 disciples who went on to do great things, I began to realize that Jesus was always having dinner. He was always communicating with food. He was often getting messages across at mealtime. These aren't the only 7 dinners that Jesus was at, but these are the 7 that I picked. You can have your list. And if you want me to trade some from your list for my list, that's fine. Call me. But the very beginning of John's Gospel, we have Jesus at the wedding where they run out of wine. Symbolically, that's Jesus blessing marriage, blessing all those who join their lives together. And then, of course, we have the feeding of the 5,000. The first one was loaves and fish. The feeding of the 4,000 was done with 12 loaves and no fish. But basically, the feeding of the 5,000 and 4,000, I consider this to be biblical proof that the church should have potluck dinners. I do believe it's proof of the potluck right there. And of course, the Last Supper, that's Jesus saying, this is my body broken for you. This is my blood shed for you. That's one of the big classic meals. We've heard that message many times. And then there's the upper room. That's the part where Thomas missed Jesus. I already mentioned that. They hadn't actually eaten yet. So that was the before dinner speech that Jesus gave when he showed up on the day of Easter. Then, of course, there's the last breakfast. We talked about that today. And the importance of feeding my sheep, the care and feeding of Jesus' followers. And then the best way. The best way for our care and feeding is to begin with our Holy Communion. To indeed remember Jesus giving his body and his blood for us. And that's also part of Peter's ministry, to feed the sheep. And this is also how the 2 others get fed. The 2 others that include us. And his Holy Communion is how Jesus is continuing to care for us and feed us spiritually. Because we know that as we go along in life, we're going to have physical hunger. We're going to always have to work for our daily bread or our living. That's why graduates often go on for further training and job experiences. You all know, it's one of these cutoff points. From care and feeding of our parents to care and feeding of ourselves. But also, we also see at this juncture the importance of paying attention to our spiritual hunger. Because it can sneak up on us like an iron deficiency. We don't realize how we get weaker and weaker as we go along in life. But if we're short on iron, we're going to feel really weak. In the same way, if we're getting short on the Spirit, we're going to feel spiritually weak. It sneaks up on us just like any vitamin deficiency, just like any anemia. When we're running short spiritually, many months may go by before we realize, I'm starving spiritually, I'm thirsty. This is why. We're given our Gospels. This is why James and John did their writing. This is why Jesus created the Holy Communion. So we would have these visible symbols to remind us of the importance of our spiritual care and feeding. So thank you everybody for joining in this symbolic spiritual last breakfast. And as we break this bread together in Holy Communion, it's a very fitting way to celebrate with the class of 2022. Amen.